You're at the Yukon Leaders Corporate Update and CEO Roundtable. My name is Michael Mccrae. I'm Mining Audience Managers at Kitco Mining. Kitco, your source for mining news. We have a great panel. We have with us Tara Christie. She is CEO of Banyan Gold. Tara, I might slip into Tara because my daughter's name's Tara, but I will endeavor. I'm next to her is David Donofrio. He is with White Gold, and at the end there, that is Mike Burke, and he is with Sitka Gold. If the mining sector has had any type of discernible theme over these last handful of years, it has been a return to safe jurisdictions. About 2 years ago, we had the acquisition / merger with Agnico Eagle and with Kirkland Lake Gold. What you were seeing with the rationale when they were putting together that large senior gold miner was that they had an emphasis on a first-tier jurisdiction. Agnico, of course, has doubled down with its Yamana Gold acquisition, really leaning into that basis of actually having a safe jurisdiction theme, and that is something that you are going to be seeing with this panel today. I should note that Agnico is up 20% above the GDX index. It has been a good theme, and it's a theme that we're seeing people to continue to invest in. First, before we get into it, let's have an introduction by our panelists. I'm going to be starting to my left, and then I'm going to be starting with Tara. Tara, could you introduce Banyan Gold, please?
Great. Thank you very much. So Banyan Gold, we're a Yukon-based exploration company. Our main project is our Ormac project, where we have a 4 million ounce inferred resource. We're right near Victoria Gold's Eagle mine as well as Hecla mining, and we're continuing to grow our resource and advance it towards development.
Thank you. David, please.
Thank you very much. Great to be here. White Gold Corp is focused in the Klondike district of the Yukon, which is just south of Dawson. This is the area made infamous by the Klondike Gold Rush at the turn of the century, and really has I think opened the eyes to the world of what could be there. Oddly enough, not too much work was done until recent days. 20 million ounces of gold came out of those creeks. No modern day exploration until about 15 years ago when infamous prospector Sean Ryan went there. He made two incredible discoveries very early on, being the Golden Saddle discovery, which we own, the Coffee discovery, which was owned by Kaminak, acquired by Goldcorp for $500 million, now in the possession of Newmont, who's moving that through the permitting process. We have an incredibly large land package. We basically own the rest of the district. So we are very excited about the blue sky opportunity. This is the guy who made these initial discoveries. We're scratching the surface. We think he cracked the code. Lots going on that. And we've also been able to take his original Golden Saddle discovery and update that into a resource of about 1.8 million ounces across all categories, close to 2 grams per ton, which is going to continue to grow. We'll have some more updates on that later in the year. So lots going on, lots to follow, but it really is what we believe an emerging district, and we're very happy to be at the very, very early days of it.
Mike, lastly with you.
Yeah, so Sitka Gold has our flagship project is the RC Gold project in the Yukon. We also work in Nevada, Arizona, and Nunavut. We have other projects, but our focus is the RC Gold project in the Yukon. We've been working there for a couple years. It's an intrusion-hosted gold deposit, similar to Victoria Gold and Fort Knox, and of course Banyan and Snowline and all those known deposits and exploration targets within the Tombstone Gold Belt. We just recently released our maiden inferred resource. That's contained in 2 deposits that are about a couple kilometers apart. But that total resource is 1.34 million ounces of gold at a grade of 0.68 grams per ton. That's comprised of the Blackjack deposit, that's 900,000 ounces at a grade of 0.83, and the Eiger deposit, that's 440,000 ounces at a grade of 0.5. And that's a 0.25 gram per ton cutoff grade. So we're focused on those deposits, obviously. They were just started, Sitka Gold just started in the belt in 2020. So to come out with a initial resource estimate so quickly is a testament to this style of deposit, to the work that others have done before us, because these are well-known deposit types. We know how the minerals occur in them. Good controls on the structural setting that emplaces the gold. So the work of others led to a fairly easy path for us. So we're going to continue drilling on that project. We can drill in the winter as well. We're in the Clear Creek mining district, well-known placer district as well. So there's great infrastructure into the property. We access it off the Klondike Highway, so a little different route than Victoria and Banyan. But we're about a 2-hour drive from Dawson and a 40-kilometer access to the power line. So we're well established as well as infrastructure. And then our property is fairly large, so we have other targets as well. We're obviously focused on the deposits, but we have a lot of work to do on the rest of the property to really unlock that value.
Thank you very much, Mike. Tara, I'm going to start with you for the discussion. The interesting thing about people, Yukon juniors that work in the space, the first thing they usually lead with is say that they are in the Yukon. Can you tell us about why it is a supportive area for actually doing the work you do?
Well, it's really great. We've actually seen that you can permit mines. Remember, Victoria Gold was just permitted in recent days. So there's a template for permitting a heap leach mine. There's a process. And yes, it's not easy permitting in any first world country. You have to do it right. You have to have the social license. And then you have to have done all your science and your base work to make sure that you have a good design. But you can get through the Yukon's permitting process, and we've seen that. So that's the first thing. And a supportive government. We have a First Nation that's in our traditional territory. We only have one First Nation, and they have what's called a settled land claim. So what lands are of special concern and which lands they have the mineral titles for, as well as what the expectations are, because they've worked with mining companies before. So that is very important. They also have development corps, which you can work with, which helps you with your projects. Other huge advantage is that infrastructure. Our project already has a power line across it and a road across it and a main highway. Those are huge advantages. The infrastructure in the Yukon is excellent compared to many jurisdictions across Canada. And I think everywhere now that there's so much push towards green power, and we're just 50 kilometers from the hydroelectric dam, but everywhere you're going to see a demand for more energy. So every jurisdiction, I think you're seeing that people have to start finding additional sources for power. So overall, it's a great jurisdiction to be working. And the most important thing is it is tremendously prolific in gold. All three of our projects, I think we've barely scratched the surface. So that's another really important thing. Does the jurisdiction have the scale of gold deposit, which will be of interest to the major? And I think we're in a new district. Yukon is the next jurisdiction, or the newest jurisdiction for mining in Canada. We've got Victoria Gold demonstrating that. All of us are growing very substantial projects showing that there's a lot more to be found. Yeah, we've been exploring since the gold rush, but wait to see what Yukon has over the next few years.
David, I'll hand that to you. Maybe talk a little bit about the Yukon and its mining culture and how supportive that is of the work that you do.
Jurisdictional risk has always been something that's been front and center when you're considering a mining investment. I'm also with the Power One Capital Group out of Toronto. We're a boutique merchant bank, and we've been financing and investing in mining exploration for over 20 years. And that's always been at the top of our due diligence checklist. Obviously, that's never been more relevant than it is today. And I think the Yukon, you really couldn't ask for a much better set of circumstances than we're seeing today. The one maybe historical knock on the Yukon was its remoteness. But when you really stand back and you think about it, we're sitting here today in Vancouver. It's pretty easy to get to any of our sites. You're a couple hours on a plane. You can drive to some of them. Maybe you got to take a fixed wing to other ones. In terms of accessibility to a project, it's not maybe what people had thought in the past. So I think the Yukon is not as remote as people think. In terms of culture, the Yukon economy is based on basically two things. I think there's government operations there, and there's natural resources. And the Yukon government itself has come out and said that they are open for business when it comes to supporting natural resources. A lot of people say that, but they've supported what they've said like Tara said, they have mines going into production, right? They put their money where their mouth is. We'd see it actually happening, working through the process, working with the premiership. There's a new premier in the Yukon ranch. He actually comes from the junior mining community or has participated in them. He's he understands what it takes. They, from the very early days, said, we are here to help you. Let us know what you need. This is rare, globally, and it's particularly rare to have that type of accessibility in a Tier 1 jurisdiction. And not only, don't take our word for it. The Fraser Institute, that's their job to rank these places in terms of all these criteria. And I think the Yukon, it perennially ranks up near the top. I don't know if it's 2, 3, 4, or 5. They say, that's what it is. And sorry, I said there's the government stuff. The rest is natural resources. I think the Yukon understands the necessity for them to be able to access their metallurgical bounty, which, as Tara mentioned, is remarkable. Every company is just finding gold everywhere, and this is just going to continue. The more gold you find, the better you understand the systems, the more gold you're able to find. So they understand that. The support is there. They're investing hundreds of millions of dollars, upgrading roadways, upgrading infrastructure within the district. And then the other, sort of very important component is the First Nation governments. Different areas of the Yukon have different First Nation groups which have different perspectives on mining. I think in the areas where we are, these are areas that are very open to mining. You see with the permitting in the Klondike district, they've had placer mining there for 100 years, so it's part of the fabric of the society. To the extent that you're respectful and you work to people, I think they all can understand the opportunity for the benefit of everyone in the region. So, from our perspective, it's been incredibly supportive across the board.
Mike, it's just not a mining culture that's up in the Yukon, but it's also supportive. It's also well associated with precious metals and a gold future. This is a place where you go to actually do gold mining.
Yeah, well, it's not just gold. The Yukon is well endowed in lots of metals, the base metals. We've got, copper mines. We've got huge copper deposits. We've got big lead zinc deposits. But obviously the Yukon's well known for the gold history with the Klondike Gold Rush. 20 million ounces of gold mined out of creeks. That's a big geochem anomaly. And there's other areas that have seen placer mining over the years. So the full potential of the hard rock mining of gold, really has been not that great. I worked at a little gold mine, Quetzal River. That's what took me up to the Yukon in the late 80s. Brewery Creek ran. We've had other small mines, but until Victoria Gold opened up the Eagle mine, we haven't had, a big mine that's producing lots of gold that makes you think, oh yeah, there's the hard rock. We've also, benefited. This business goes through cycles. These intrusion-related gold deposits, the orogenic gold deposit that Dave has, those were discovered a few years ago. Then there's work done to figure them out geologically and the science behind it. And then something maybe goes south like the gold price and you wait. And I think, especially in the Tombstone Gold Belt, we're really seeing a revival in that belt where there's a lot of known gold occurrences that haven't received the work that they really needed. And now we're in a nice phase that we're able to do that. Tara's property, for instance, when I worked for the Yukon government, I visited Bernie Kraft, the prospector, while he was hand mining his 12 tons of 1 ounce material that he sent down to the Trail smelter and fed his family for the winter. So, and now it's gone from a guy mining 12 tons and getting 12 ounces to Tara's group outlining 4 million plus. So, I visited the Clear Creek property as well in the early 90s, and, there's been good indications of gold. Everybody knows the potential, but we're lucky enough to be the first ones that have drilled off a resource. Dave's neck of the woods, it's a little earlier. The discoveries were made, in 98, but the knowledge that's gone into that because of the support of, the Yukon Geological Survey, the research, the work that goes in that, the Geological Survey of Canada, figuring out why these deposits are there and their controls has led us to, better exploration success. But I think the bottom line is its mineral potential. You know, the Yukon is well recognized for its mineral potential, and whether that's gold or silver, lead, zinc, copper, we're way up there. So it's a great place to explore. And with that support of government, as well as the knowledge of mining companies, we've come a long ways in 20 years. I mentioned I worked at the Quetzal River Gold Mine in the 90s, or the 80s. I'm older than I think. But anyways, I work closely with the First Nation community. We had a lot of First Nations folks working at the mine, but that's what they did. They worked at the mine. Now, you know, we're bringing them in as partners. We're trying to make, you know, the benefits that we gain through mining, you know, go to the people that deserve it most, and that's the people whose backyard we're working in. We're always working in the backyard of a First Nation. They're going to live there for a long time. They've been there for a long time. So to maximize the benefit to the local community, then to the Yukon, then to Canada, that's what we're all about. You know, the mining industry creates wealth and, you know, pays for schools and healthcare and all that stuff. So I'm kind of proud to be part of that, and hope that that's something that we're doing a lot more of in the future.
Thank you, Mike. Tara, turning again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think in the last handful of years there's been two companies that have actually gone into production that has been close to where you're located as well. And then there's just been a whole bunch of seniors that have actually come in and then taken interest and then are doing JVs or doing an investment with companies as well too. Maybe just thumbnail what you would think in the last, last handful of years, what you consider to be the major milestones, or would have been some real wind in the sails for what's happening up in the Yukon?
Well, you know, I guess I probably should go back to Underworld. You know, the purchase of Underworld by Kinross, and then Kaminak purchased by Goldcorp, and then, of course, taken over by Newmont. Those were pretty big investments in the Yukon, and, you know, validation. You know, we had VRIC take some investments, Agnico and Kinross, and in some of the other companies as well, including White Gold. And I think that's validation of this jurisdiction. They don't invest money if they don't think that, you know, the jurisdiction first, and the second is that there's the scale of gold deposit. Another milestone, Victoria Gold actually getting financed and into production. Can you take a project from exploration, actually go through the feasibility study and permit it and put it into production in a cycle? Lots of projects get stalled out at one part of that project. So that's a huge success for every Yukon explorer, to see that a mine can go the distance, and now they're getting the bugs out of it, and then once they hit their nameplate, that will be a really key milestone for all of us. I think the new discoveries that we're seeing through the belt, you know, Snowline, Sitka, Banyan, really also validate the jurisdiction. And personally, as Major's investment, Banyan really didn't want to get anyone invested too early, because often then that means that others won't be interested. So I think for us, you know, having it so that we get to that stage and that scale where we have multiple competitors, I think is really how we're going to generate value for our shareholders. But as a jurisdiction, I think you're just going to see more of that as we have more successes.
David, in the recent opening of the Victoria Gold, I just really noticed that there was a lot of investment, there was a lot of activity in the Yukon that was coming in, and it really provided momentum, just not for places that were nearby it, but just also for the Yukon as a whole.
You know, absolutely, and I would actually say it was muted from my perspective, the type of reaction. Like that validation of you know, the ability to have I think there's no doubt about the mineral opportunity here, but you know, can you get mines built? Can you get them financed? When that Victoria mine, you know, came into production, every company in the Yukon should have tripled just based on that alone. Now, we've been in a funny market in the juniors and the precious metals and whatnot, but that aside, you know, I think you're right to key on that, on what does it mean to see success in building mines and the investment of majors. These majors, you have to understand, they are, you know, organizations with tens of thousands of employees, with specialists in every single category that have done this for decades all over the world. So, you know, the amount of work that they do internally before they make an investment is incredible. You know, I've been fortunate to have dealt with some of these majors in different capacities over the years. And, you know, when you're talking, you have a junior, you have a decision, you have 2-3 people at you have a couple of meetings. For them, these are, decisions that take months. They bring in all their top consultants. So, it cannot be understated the importance of these types of investments. And Tara and Michael mentioned, what we've seen there. We've seen now the largest gold company in the world, Newmont. They did inherit that project through the acquisition of Goldcorp. They've done a tremendous amount of work on that, and they like it. And, they believe that it's a Newmont caliber opportunity. Now, to be a Newmont caliber opportunity, it's got to be big. So that's big. As part of it, they're now moving through the permitting process. So, they know what it takes to do there. They've, committed to also invest in the infrastructure in the community. So that speaks volumes. Rio coming into Western, that's the second largest mining company in the world. Same thing. Agnico coming into white gold, Kinross being an investor of white gold. So these are some of the biggest and most successful companies in the world that are now vectoring in on this small area, really. And so I think people, if you're looking for validation of opportunity, don't take my word for it. Take the best company in the world's action as a guide to follow.
Mike, when you're doing investor presentations, when you're talking to potential investors, what are some of the milestones that you indicate about Yukon? What are some of the highlights that you would talk about that have happened in the last couple of years?
Well, I'm just going to repeat what these two have said. It's a Tier 1 jurisdiction. We're in Canada, we're in the Yukon. Your biggest asset that you have is your land tenure, and we have security of tenure in the Yukon. We've got a solid legal system in Canada. We know that, other places in the world, things can be a little tenuous, but we're not dealing with any of that. So that's critical. That's why the Yukon is such a good place to be. Then obviously the mineral potential, the fact that, as Tara mentioned, we've had a project, Dublin Gulch, now the Eagle Gold Mine, that from the early days of exploration in the early 90s, it is now a producing mine. That's critical. People have to be able to see that things can go from start to finish. There's no use investing your money if you can't build a mine, because that's the goal of all of us. So that's, really in a nutshell, that's it. It's security of tenure combined with that mineral potential, and away you go. You're able to complete your project as you promised.
Tara, I'd like to bring it back to you. I'd like to talk a little bit about infrastructure, and then we'll go cost, and then we'll hear about infrastructure at each one of the sites. It is the Yukon. It is up in the north right now, so there might be the perception around that. It does have a relatively small population base, given the land mass that is up there right now. Talk about the infrastructure at your project, and maybe also talk more largely about the infrastructure in the Yukon itself.
Sure. Well, specifically, our project has great infrastructure. We've got a power line right through the property. It was actually just rebuilt in January of 2021. It's a 138 kilovolt line. It's only energized to half its capacity with 2 mines already on it. And it goes right to the hydroelectric dam that's just 50 kilometers away. So, we're already within, I think we need 50 meters of power line, 50 meters, not kilometers, to get across the road to connect our camp. And we're already looking at that. We put in propane generators this year to reduce our cost and our greenhouse gas, but ultimately getting connected to the grid is really important. We've got the main highway right through our property that goes to Keno, and then the South McQuestion Road, which also serves as the access road. Those are year-round maintained by the Yukon government. And then we have tens of kilometers of road on our property already to our targets, and existing trails and infrastructure in the property. We have cell phone service on ours, which I think is pretty unique. It's actually a challenge when your drillers are off talking on their cell phone, but it's also great from a safety perspective. And there's even fiber optic cable along the power line and out to Victoria Gold. So great infrastructure for us. In terms of our internal infrastructure, that's something that we have to thank COVID for, because originally when we were doing exploration, we were staying in Alexco, now Hekla's camp, because we didn't really want to spend the money on having to have our own camp infrastructure. But now we have 2 camps. We've got one 49-person camp and one 35-person camp. You know, fuel prices and other stuff also drove us to put in fuel infrastructure. We put in large tanks, one to reduce our handling, but also to let us be able to get pricing that's competitive. So, you know, we have enough fuel storage on site that we can have 3 drills turning and still have 40 days of fuel. So that lets us actually save $20,000, $30,000 per load of fuel. So infrastructure ultimately saves you a huge amount of money if you use it and build it. So we've done a lot to improve our internal infrastructure with the roads and trails that we've built on site, as well as the infrastructure for our people, because it's critical. Having communications for modern crews, if you don't have good internet at your site, you are not going to have a good cruise, and you can't get your data out. So, you know, the days of old when you could just have a tent camp in the middle of nowhere and fly in are definitely more challenging. And we really wanted to get set up because we envision, you know, what it's going to take to drill this project out. Well, you know, we can drill year round. We started in January 26th last year, which is a little too early because we had to drill through -50, which we can do because we have infrastructure and we've got people that are talented that know how to do it. And unfortunately, when it's -35 and it drops to -50, it's too late. You either have to keep going or you have a really big mess. So we just kept going and we successfully got through it. But sorry, that's a little side story, but it was not for the faint of heart to be drilling in -50. But being year-round with infrastructure is a huge advantage for the Yukon. You don't think of Yukon as seasonal anymore. All 3 of these projects have the opportunity to have much longer than your traditional 3-4 month drill season. And so I think we have to change perceptions, and the infrastructure in the Yukon definitely doesn't. And I won't blabber on because I'll let somebody else talk about the more global infrastructure. It is really just getting better with the funding from the federal and territorial governments towards road, looking at power alternatives. I think it's really positioning the Yukon for great success.
Thank you, Tara. David, can you tell us a little bit about the infrastructure around your project, and also maybe talk largely about the Yukon too?
Yeah, I think Tara did a great job covering the Yukon. It's a very different place than, you know, people think of, and, you know, I think the YMA is going to have a tour this year again, and, you know, with COVID restrictions down, I implore people to come. You know, it's mind-boggling how easy it is to get there. It's, you know, English, your own dollar. You know, you do not feel like it's remote. And again, back to my original point, there's no point today to travel around the world to look for deposits. We have them in our backyard with all the security. You know, from a risk-reward perspective, my belief is there's truly no better place than the Yukon to be in this industry. Our particular properties, you know, we inherited a 100-person camp from Kinross when they merged in their properties with an airstrip, so it's pretty easy to get to. A lot of our properties are road accessible, placer roads. Those will be upgraded through these federal government, territorial government program, as well as private investment with Newmont announcing that they would be investing to upgrade the road system. So this is will be a totally different district, you know, within a few years here, I think, with everything being road accessible. That changes not only the cost of accessibility, but also the length of accessibility. You know, cold is not necessarily the biggest issue in the Yukon. It's daylight, and it's more from a safety perspective. Obviously, safety's got to be a number 1 priority. So that's, you know, when it gets dark and the helicopters, and that's more so the issue. So I think there's going to be dramatic changes in a very, very short future in that regard. Communications is a big deal. Thanks to Mr. Elon Musk, his satellite coverage is coming to the Yukon. I think this year will actually be our first year of having that. And now it's, you know, it's a totally different environment, right? Data back and forth, communication back and forth. It helps for safety, helps for so many different regards. So this is, you know, not your parents' Yukon anymore. You know, people need to understand that, and it's really game on.
Mike, if you could talk a bit about the infrastructure at your project.
Yeah, our project as well is road accessible. We're only a 2-hour drive from Dawson. As I mentioned, you take the Klondike Highway and we're 40 kilometers off of that in the Clear Creek Placer District, so plenty of roads up there and proximity to a power line. It's not 50 meters, it's 40 kilometers, which is still a pretty good number. We're happy with that. Definitely, One of the communication is a huge part of it. I mean, that's really why exploration has enjoyed a longer season in the past number of years. As communications gets better and you have better infrastructure in your camps, you can work longer, and that's all centered around safety, really. If you're working in the winter and you're not able to pick up the satellite phone or whatever communication you have and get help right away, that hampered exploration in the past. So the 3-month exploration season is over in the Yukon. We can work year-round if you install the proper infrastructure, and there's a lot more of it. Importantly, too, is we have good infrastructure now, but it's only getting better. As Dave mentioned, you're going to be benefiting from some of that federal infrastructure money, improving the roads. That's going to go right by your project down to Coffee. But also, I'm a director of the Yukon Chamber of Mines, and we've had several meetings over the last couple years with federal and territorial ministers. Met with Minister Friedland a couple years ago during COVID, when the federal government is looking at infrastructure development and then ways to improve the economy. And the Chamber of Mines is a strong advocate of connecting the Yukon to the southern power grid. I believe that notion has gotten a little more traction recently. Our new premier did a tweet on the weekend that looking at grid power, connecting to the southern grid, and that's a critical part. The Yukon has great infrastructure, but as we enter into this new era of larger, more successful mines, and we realize the mineral potential, I think our governments are recognizing that they need to help us out and tap into the potential of the Yukon. So that's a key piece, is the future infrastructure of the Yukon is going to be a lot stronger. And yeah, Elon Musk, we don't have to rely on those little satellites anymore, that the communication slows down. So it's a changing world up there. It's quite something.
Mike, thank you very much, and thanks for talking about the grid. I'm glad that you mentioned all that. I want to ask the panelists next about switching to community support as opposed to talking about the territory support. We have talked about the culture in the territory. We've talked about the broader support, and we've talked about the mining culture that exists in the Yukon, Tara. But maybe talk about locally the type of support that your project and these other projects are able to deliver.
Sure. Well, all of us in the Yukon's mining industry know how important it is to regularly communicate with the First Nations, whose traditional territories we work in, and the community. And they sometimes are the same, and they're sometimes not. So the broader community is something that we regularly make sure that our presence is known. We have community meetings with the First Nation. It's both important to talk to the First Nation on the political level with their chief and council, as well as their bureaucracy, the lands departments and the heritage departments, and make sure that you are showing that you are doing the right work. We did heritage studies this year. We're doing some moose and traditional knowledge studies with the Natonaik done this year. We met with the chief and council. And then more broadly, making sure that you're talking to community members. One of the things that we do different, so we're in a pretty competitive area because we got 2 mines, and they take a huge part of the available labor force to Victoria Gold and Hecla, and they've got all kinds of high-paying jobs and lots of benefits. So for us, we got to work a little harder to get people, and so we are often really training people and bringing in a lot of the people that have less experience, and we have those jobs. We have plain old labor jobs, and it's something that we take very seriously, and there's lots of challenges in some of these communities, and we find ways to, because we're small still, we're still exploration, we're a bit more family, less, when you get 400 people on a site, that's a much bigger environment. So it is actually a great way to bring young people and people to learn about the industry, and we train them, and then they go back to their community and they have positive things to say about where they're working and the people that they're working with. So that's one thing that we do, not only because we need a workforce, but because we believe in giving back to the community and hiring the people that don't have jobs in the community and giving them an opportunity to learn a skill and have a good paying job. So it is but it's always a challenge. You need to make sure that you are maintaining your social license, and every stage of development of a project has a different level, which you need to be doing that at. Obviously, we're ramping up, so our obligation is probably bigger than the Sitka's, who's still, they're a little bit further away, and they're still earlier in their exploration phase, and we're moving towards potentially permitting, starting our baseline environmental work, and you need to do the right amount of work for the stage of your project, and that's something I think that we know how to do well in the Yukon.
David, can you talk a little bit about the community support that you're building around White Gold?
Sure. I'm glad I sat here. Tara's answering these questions so well. We got lucky.
We're getting lucky with all of you guys.
Yeah, like Tara, like Mike, we've identified this as a very paramount matter for it to be done correctly. And, we've been fortunate enough to have a good working relationship with the First Nations in our area. And, we've approached this, from the very beginning as whatever, we are within their traditional territories. We need to be respectful of that. And whatever our goal is has to be mutually beneficial to their communities. And from there, what does that mean? I think you have to operate, as Tara mentioned, you want to have always full transparency. You want to work towards common goals, proper and open and continuous communication. And it's an evolving relationship, but it's that is as important to our company as our technological investment and everything else. So it's I think this group here certainly recognizes that, and that's it's the right thing to do, not just because that's what you have to do to advance your project. It's the right thing to do because it's the right thing to do. Right? We're in their traditional territories, so everyone should be winning.
Mike, community support at Sitka.
It's all about communication, really. Our First Nations, we have the settled First Nations and unsettled First Nations. But they're all very sophisticated. They have lands departments, they have lands and resources departments, and they know what we're doing because they follow us. But as well, we keep them informed on what it is we're doing. When we get to the stage where the First Nation wants to engage and look towards impact benefits agreements or anything like that, they're certainly going to let us know. But really the key criteria is that communications piece. We live and work in each other's communities, and so by keeping that door open, that's the most important part of all. So when your project gets to the stage where it's of importance for them to get involved in a bigger way, then that door is always opened. As I mentioned, before in the 80s, I worked in a mine, and we hired the people from the local community, but there was never any idea that they would be partners, and that's what's changed in the Yukon, and that's what's going to give us our ability to keep working in the Yukon with the benefits flowing through to the communities that we're working in. Also, I think the leaders in our mining community also work in general to impact the local communities through our associations, where we're lobbying the government to look at things like royalties. Our royalties flow through to the federal government, and it goes into a black hole, right? So, to look at ideas like having royalties flow back to the local communities and have those benefits be applied in the Yukon is things that we're looking for. So there's broader based things. You have the community whose backyard you work in, but there's also the broader community of the entire Yukon. Other First Nations don't necessarily have the same mineral potential as, say, Nacho Nyack Dun, where Tara and I work, or the TH where Dave does. So, we also have to look at ways to benefit the entire First Nations community, not just the ones whose backyard we work in. And so that's work that we do as well too, and that's pretty important.
Thank you very much, Mike. What's planned over the next 12 months? What are the milestones over the next 12 months, Tara?
We have a really exciting year planned. We're gearing up, and our guys will be mobilizing to the field in about 15 days. So we'll have 4 drills turning. We're planning a phase 1 drill program of 25,000 meters, which will put us into about August. Our resource update, expect that mid-year. Expect the 50 drill holes from last year that we don't have assays back in the next couple months. And then we'll have news flow from our new drill results. And we're super excited about our targets for this year. We can follow up on some of those great holes, that 2-kilometer step out, that 84 meters of 1.14. But we have some real new high-value targets both outside of our main resource areas, and we still have some brand new ideas based on the huge database we have now on where we might find that intrusion that caused all our mineralization. So it should be a really exciting year for our shareholders.
Thank you, Tara. David, next 12 months, milestones for the next 12 months.
Yeah, I think we have a pretty exciting 12 months up ahead of us as well. A couple of things, some from the last year's program, which have not come out, where there's going to be more drill results. We've drilled the gap area between 2 new discoveries near our flagship deposit, some results that come out on that. We will also be having a resource update coming out in the next couple of months, which ties our few different newly discovered zones together, so we're pretty excited to see what comes there. And coming up from an exploration perspective in 2023, we're going to be doing more drilling on our Betty Ford discovery. For those that weren't following, we had an exceptional drill hole on a maiden program 2 years ago, 50 meters of 3.5 grams, basically from surface. We've extended that this year, remains open. The grade's incredible. We drilled 9 grams of 18 meters this year. This property is contiguous and along the same fault system that hosts Newmont's multi-million ounce coffee deposit, also contiguous to Western Copper's massive porphyry deposit. So we are in elephant country. We're hitting incredible grades. We're going to do some more work there. And we've got a couple other very exciting areas. The nice thing about we've invested so much to bring these properties to the drill-ready stage. Now we're in the drilling time. This is where you can, really get some exciting bang for your buck. We have a property called the Nolan, which is just west of Dawson. You can drive to it. It's in a historically very prolific placer camp, several 100,000 ounces. It's on a fault. It's got a 2-kilometer soil anomaly, never been drilled. We'll be drilling that. And, I think this just speaks to the excitement of why we're all wanting to invest in the Yukon. It's grassroots territory, and, to be able to be people putting a first drill hole, in this great jurisdiction in our backyard, it's almost too good to be true, but we're fortunate to seen the opportunity, and we're all working towards realizing the benefits of the results.
Mike, last goes to you for the last milestones over the next 12 months at Sitka.
Yeah, I like that Nolan target. I've been watching that one for a while, and I know, Tara, you've got some great targets on your property as well. So we're doing the same thing. We've just released our initial resource. We're obviously going to be drilling on those to expand those resources. We're doing a winter drilling program as well. We're not starting in 15 days, though. Your drillers are tougher than ours. Same company, though. We're using Kluane, so we're happy about that. But we're likely going to start in March. We're going to start a little bit later than Tara, but that helps get a jump on the season. We'll have news flow earlier in the year, coming out late May, early June. So that's going to drive us into our, field season, the main part of the season in the summer, when we continue drilling for resource expansion, as well as we have other drill holes in areas that we've gotten some pretty nice drill hole intersections that with a bit of follow-up, we can, again, look at new areas that have resource potential. And then, of course, just general exploration. Just like David and Tara, we've got a lot of other ground in the Yukon and in these belts where we're working. And there's a lot of potential in there, and we've got to do some of that more early stage work, a little more soil sampling, get out there, do some geology, dig some trenches by hand, and start developing more targets, because we're really starting to realize, we know we have great mineral potential, but recent years, the amount of ounces in the white gold district that have been defined, the more than 7 million ounces since 2020 that have been added to the inventory in the Tombstone Gold Belt, Tara, you're 4 million plus ounces. Victoria Gold coming into commercial production. Victoria's discovery of the Raven, and now us adding a million plus ounces to that resource. If that doesn't start catching the majors' attention, they're asleep at the wheel, you know? So we really hope that we start seeing that potential that we know so well really get pushed through this next mineral cycle, because I'm liking the price of gold. It's going in the right direction, and we hope that we're really able to capitalize on that, and our shareholders get the benefit of the hard work that we're doing, because I know we're all pretty tired after a long week, and it's just the start. So here we go. Looking forward to 2023.
I want to thank Tara with Banyan Gold. I want to thank David with White Gold. And I want to thank you, Mike, with Sitka Gold. My name is Michael Mccrae with Kitco Mining. Kitco, your source for metal news. Have a good afternoon, everybody.